What if everything you thought you knew about one of the most powerful families in American politics wasn't the whole truth? What if a single sentence, spoken in the middle of a quiet chamber session, calm, deliberate, undeniable, was enough to stop the room cold? Enough to silence even Donald Trump. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't the usual swirl of rumors and internet speculation. This was about official records, sworn statements, and a question that refused to disappear. And once you hear what unfolded, you'll understand why not a single eye in that chamber dared look away. The scene itself seemed ordinary at first. Lawmakers seated, aides shuffling papers, reporters leaning over notepads. Yet the atmosphere was thick, humming with unspoken tension. Restless whispers skimmed through the rows. Something was coming. No one could quite define it, but everyone could feel it pressing down like storm air before lightning. Then Jasmine Crockett rose. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her presence cut through the noise on its own. Straight-backed, eyes sweeping the chamber, she paused long enough on Trump's allies to make the silence settle like a weight. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Chairs stilled. The hush was almost physical. And then she spoke. "Ivanka Trump," Crockett said slowly, every syllable deliberate, "is not only Donald Trump's daughter. She is his wife." The words seemed to fracture the air itself. At first there was a stunned stillness, as though the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Then came the nervous chuckles, lawmakers glancing at each other, unsure if they had misheard, unsure if this was sarcasm, parody, or something far darker. But Crockett didn't blink. She didn't smirk. She didn't let the room off the hook. "I have documents to support this statement," she continued, her tone sharp but steady. "Official records." The gasp was audible. It wasn't just surprise. It was disbelief colliding with dread. The words documents and official echoed against the chamber walls, reshaping what had seemed unthinkable into something dangerously possible. Reporters scribbled furiously, some nearly tearing through their notepads. Aides froze mid-step, phones in hand, eyes wide. Trump's allies whispered urgently, faces shifting between anger and alarm. And still, Crockett stood there, a calm figure in the middle of a storm she herself had unleashed. The silence after each of her sentences carried more force than shouting ever could. And in that silence, memories stirred. People remembered. The old interview where Trump, half grinning, had said, "If Ivanka weren't my daughter, maybe I'd be dating her." The audience's nervous laughter, the host's uneasy smile. Clips replayed for years, brushed off by some as crass humor. But they never quite faded. Other moments resurfaced, the lingering compliments about her body, her beauty, her elegance. Remarks that had always left critics unsettled. Supporters dismissed it as Trump being Trump. But in this moment, under Crockett's framing, those fragments of the past rearranged themselves into something darker, something that suddenly demanded to be seen. The chamber shifted uneasily. Lawmakers glanced at one another, calculating. Some clenched their jaws, others lowered their heads. What had once been awkward banter now loomed as part of a possible pattern, a story that, if true, would rewrite the very way power had operated in Trump's orbit. Crockett let the weight settle before speaking again, calm, precise, each word chosen like a blade. "I have the documents, government-issued certificates, licenses, records." The whispers erupted again, louder this time. Some skeptical, some terrified, some already convinced. No one was neutral. And still, Crockett didn't wave the papers in the air, didn't play to spectacle. That wasn't the point. The point was the pause, the suspense, the way her words forced the room to imagine what those documents might reveal. The claim was out now, lodged in the chamber's collective mind like a thorn. And no matter how anyone tried to dismiss it, the silence that followed was proof enough. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. She made it clear she wasn't bluffing. Crockett didn't need to raise her hand or wave documents in the air. Her restraint was its own weapon. She let the silence stretch, let the weight of what if press down on every seat. This wasn't just about a claim anymore. It was about the possibility, the terrifying possibility, that the story people thought they knew about Donald Trump had never been the full story. Maybe, just maybe, something had been hidden in plain sight. Something carefully managed, strategically obscured. Crockett leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but cutting. "Records don't speculate," she said. "They verify." The uproar that followed wasn't the roar of outrage. It was something more unsettling. Disbelief laced with fear, calculation layered beneath denial. Trump's allies scrambled. "Lies!" one shouted. "Political theater!" another cried. But even their protests rang hollow, like actors struggling to convince themselves as much as the audience. And then, every gaze turned to Trump. He sat rigid, jaw clenched, shoulders stiff. Not the blustering, finger-pointing figure the chamber was used to. No smirking bravado, no defiant grin. His aides swarmed, whispering frantically, feeding him lines. But his eyes never left Crockett. Finally, he spoke. "This is false," he barked. "Completely false." His voice was firm, but it trembled at the edges. He repeated it louder. "It's a lie." But the room didn't shift. No one exhaled. The words didn't erase what had already been spoken. The silence that followed belonged not to Trump, but to Crockett. Because she had reframed the moment. Whether or not her documents were ever shown, the story had already embedded itself. And worse, people weren't just listening to her. They were remembering him, his own words, his old interviews, the jokes about Ivanka, the way he praised her beauty, her body, her elegance. The puzzle pieces suddenly seemed less like isolated moments and more like fragments of a larger design. Crockett didn't press on the scandal. Instead, she shifted the ground beneath them. "This isn't about tabloid gossip," she said evenly. "It's about strategy." The chamber leaned in, some openly, others trying to pretend indifference. "Think about it," she said. "What builds trust? What earns sympathy? What sells the image of safety, stability, family values? A politician with a strong, supportive daughter by his side. That image reassures people. It softens the edges. It looks wholesome." Her voice sharpened. "But what if that image wasn't what you assumed? What if it was constructed?" Gasps rippled again. This wasn't just about one man anymore. This was about power, about control, about how narratives are sculpted, rehearsed, and protected. She broke it down, methodical, almost clinical, like laying evidence on a table. 1. Shaping perception. A supportive family makes a politician relatable, even likable. 2. Controlling the narrative. Keep it simple. Don't let complications confuse the base. 3. Avoiding scrutiny. The simpler the story, the less anyone questions it. 4. Protection. Traditional images, father, daughter, family, are sacred. Criticize them, and you become the problem. 5. Social acceptance. People want to believe in tradition. They want the picture-perfect frame, no matter what's behind the glass. With each point, the chamber's mood shifted further. What she described wasn't salacious. It was strategic. Not scandal, but stagecraft. Not secrecy, but construction. And suddenly, people saw it. The long arc of a narrative built and rebuilt, polished and defended over years. A brand, a shield, a story that protected, elevated, and deflected. For the first time, Trump tried to pivot. He forced his voice back into strength. He spoke about patriotism, about the economy, about anything that would move the spotlight. But the air was different now. No matter what words he used, the image Crockett had painted lingered in the minds of everyone listening. Because the question wasn't whether she had the documents in her hand. The question was whether the story people had believed for years was ever true to begin with. Trump spoke about the economy, about jobs, about poll numbers. His words tumbled out, a familiar script, lines he had recited 100 times before. But the chamber wasn't listening. Not really. They were still back on I have the documents. Minutes stretched like hours, cameras zoomed tighter, pins scratched frantically against paper. Phones buzzed with alerts racing beyond the walls. And then, Ivanka, she sat motionless. No denial, no interruption, no attempt to laugh it off. Just silence. A silence so blank, so unreadable, it reverberated louder than any shouted defense could have. Reporters whispered from the gallery, their voices hushed but urgent. Did she just imply? Aides muttered nervously. Where would she even get those records? Lawmakers traded quick, uneasy glances. Could this change everything? Trump moved again, pacing now, breaking his usual rhythm. Sharp steps, unfocused gestures. Sweat gathered at his temple. His body betrayed the tension his voice tried to bury. And across the chamber, Crockett, still, unbothered, like a figure carved in stone. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't rushed to fill the silence. She didn't need to, because she already understood the power of suggestion. You don't need to wave papers in the air. You don't need to show the proof in that moment. When framed with precision, when tethered to memories people already carry, you don't force belief. You plant doubt. And doubt is contagious. It spreads faster than fact. It lingers longer than denial. Even as the session wound down, the air stayed heavy, charged, unsettled. Trump's rebuttal had been heard, but it hadn't landed. The aura of control he carried like armor was fractured now, just enough for everyone to notice. As the chamber emptied, reporters filed out in a frenzy. Aides scrambled to manage fallout, and allies whispered furiously in corners. But one truth remained. Perception had shifted. And in politics, perception isn't just important. It's everything. So now we're left with the question. Was Jasmine Crockett crafting a warning? A carefully staged lesson about how easily images can be manufactured and consumed? Or was she pulling back a curtain, exposing a truth buried so deeply we never dared to see it? Either way, this story is far from finished.